I think one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking to women about is they want to be 100% ready. They want to know 63 different electives they should take so they can get into cyber, where guys are like, oh, well, I'll just jump in and I'll figure it out. So we somehow have to get women to understand that they can jump in and fearlessly get involved in cyber in a variety of roles and be very successful.
Welcome to the Reimagining Cyber podcast, where we share short and to the point perspectives on the cyber landscape. It's all about engaging yet casual conversations on what organizations are doing to reimagine their cyber programs while ensuring their business objectives are top priority. With my co-host, Stan Wisseman, Head of Security Strategist, I'm Rob Borrego, Chief Security Strategist, and this is Reimagining Cyber. Stan, I'm really excited for this episode. In honor of Women in History Month, we are celebrating women in cyber. We have some great guests with us today, so let's kick it off, Stan, and hand it over to you.
Rob, I am excited as well. We are joined by three women who have made cybersecurity a focus in their careers. We have Phyllis Woodruff, VP of IT Risk and Compliance at Global Payments, Lori Sussman, Assistant Professor at the University of Southern Maine, and is in the Department of Technology that provides degree programs for cybersecurity, and our very own Tammy Schuring, Head of Data Privacy and Protection Solutions at CyberRes. Thank you all for being here today. Phyllis, seems like everyone's path to cybersecurity is a little different. Can you share how you got into it?
Absolutely. And for me, cyber came through technology and a fascination with technology. And pretty much self-taught, came up through the ranks, began programming on a PDP-11 many, many years ago, and fell in love with it. As part of that, security became a natural extension. And of course, I'm in financial services, and payments truly welcomed me. And understanding that base technology gave me an edge as to how the adversaries could get in, where were the holes that we needed to patch, and so on.
Now, Laurie, kind of turning over to you. You've had a really interesting background, starting way back when with West Point, if you will, right? And kind of that trajectory over time to get to where you are today. Why don't you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have a very unusual background when it comes to being an academic, because I started off as one of the very first women to graduate from West Point. And I immediately went into the communications technology area in the United States Army Signal Corps. So I was a CIO kind of person doing technology. And if you're in the military, you're doing security, because it's all about worrying about various attack vectors that can be both technological, physical, as well as administrative. So you really have to focus on that. When I retired, I went into private industry for about 10 years. So I was at companies big and small. I was at Cisco, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, where I did direct solutions that were both security and IT focused for the Department of Defense and Fortune 500 companies. And most of us who have been around for a while, we were in cyber before cyber was a thing. 10 years ago, there were really no cyber specific jobs. It's really interesting that in the last 10 years, if you look at cyberseek.org, we're now up to 1 million cyber workers, but there's still 500,000 open jobs. So it's a great growing field. And that's part of the reason that I did the pivot to academia. There's a great book called Halftime by Bob Buford. And he talks about the pivot from success to significance. And I felt like I had been very successful in both the public and private sector, so I wanted to give back. So I got to my doctorate and had been teaching cybersecurity at USM for the past few years.
We're going to get into a little bit of the skills gap aspect that you just touched upon as well as we get the conversation going. Tammy, I want to go over to you and talk about, kind of your path, and with you as well, kind of, we've had these conversations, the passion that you exert as part of the industry and your experiences. So wouldn't you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I fell into tech in '93. I think it chose me. I didn't choose it, but growing up in Silicon Valley and being an athlete, I thought, though, why would I do that? That's so obvious. I don't want to do tech. Yuck. Um, but it was literally, it may sound like it's cliche, but it was literally a company moving from the garage to their first office. And I was asked to help out as I was waiting for my doctorate to start in mathematics. I had graduated from Santa Barbara and was living at home in San Mateo. Thought it'd be a great little break, and I decided to take this job, and it changed everything. I had no idea, Rob, that there were positions in enterprise software that no code was required. And even though I have a degree in math and economics, and I was, maybe doing a little Fortran programming, a little Hello World back in the day, there was this element of I really wanted to be in a position that involved connection, helping solve problems. And I didn't see myself as sort of the back office, heads down type of person, but had no idea there's actually this other part to tech and then later cyber. So I was in software since 93. And then in 2004, a board member from a previous company approached me and said, hey, there's some amazing innovations in cryptology that are spinning out of Stanford University into this tech company that they had just helped fund. And they wanted me to come in and help them bring it to the enterprise. And I literally spent 6 months, Rob, saying no, because in 2004, cybersecurity was not critical path. However, in sort of towards the end of that 6-month period when they wouldn't take no for an answer, finally we sat in a room and we stopped talking about security and cyber. We talked about the data. And the data, I got really excited. I thought, wow, the risk and the opportunity that data brings to the world. And, as we were starting to only see the beginnings of how much data we could pull together and the correlations that would bring, and, the ahas. And so it kind of chose me, but I loved being a part of the earlier phases to try to help bring understanding around the risks to the data and also innovation so that we could protect it. I mean, at the time, state of the art was protecting the servers that data sat on and the pipes that data moved through. And I remember asking in those discovery meetings early on in 2004, why aren't we protecting the data? Kind of seems like the bad guys want the data, yet we're sitting here applying these solutions on the servers and the pipes. And the big aha was that we could change that with the technology innovations. And I just couldn't not do this at that point, because I remember thinking I had pretty little kids. I think they were 1 and 4 at the time. And as I heard the risks outlined and the state of what people were working within in corporate America and universities and government at that time, I thought, my kids aren't even going to have an identity. I've got to do this. And so, that was 2004. Here I am.
You felt compelled in the need to do it. I have to admit, I think you're probably one of the early, or it must be kind of odd to have been a PhD student in a math program, right, Tammy? Because there probably weren't that many other females, let's face it.
There was not, and actually I never did finish. Tech, I think, abducted me. But in working on my undergrad, I was in a situation where I was one of very few women in the rooms. And matter of fact, I ended up at a position one time where I did really well on a test. And for some reason, this particular professor, this would never happen now, Lori, but they were putting the rankings up on the overhead projector, with the little wipe off pen. And I happened to be the top of the class that day. And the professor asked me to stand up, and everyone just went, oh. And then a couple people came up to me after class and they said, we either thought you were lost or you were the professional note taker because we just didn't understand how you could be in this class. And I don't know, I'd have to say that those comments, all they did was drive me. But that's not the world that I wish for my daughter, that's for sure. And I know it has changed a lot.
Lori, could I ask, what are you seeing now in terms of student body makeup?
That's a great question, Phyllis. And sadly, women are still highly underrepresented. So it's really important. For Tammy, it was fantastic. That drove her. For me, it's the same thing. I was told, silly girls don't go to military academies. So that just made me that much more, focused on getting in and getting through that. But that doesn't have to be every woman's experience. That shouldn't be every daughter's experience. And we've just got to do better networking, setting up systems for women to support each other. So, because there's still many, many classes, too many classes where there's only one or two women in the room.
And are they received well?
Yes, the women
Good.
are received well, but there are still some really interesting dynamics that women have to learn in terms of being assertive. I think that, one of the things that makes me crazy is when we have group projects, somehow the woman always becomes the scribe. And I'm like, I whisper in their ears, don't resist the temptation, make the guys the scribe. But just little things to make sure that they're seen as equals and that they don't immediately become the administrative person in the room. I don't know if you've seen similar things, Phyllis, Tammy.
I know I absolutely have. And it's always interesting to suddenly take control of the situation and to have the men in the room begin looking at you a little bit differently. And they hear the authority in your voice and in your body language, and it's important. It makes a world of difference, and it means that we can get something done. One of the things I counsel any woman I come in contact with is own your skills, recognize them, embrace your superpowers. They are there.
And I think it's so important that people see, women see people like you, Phyllis, and you, Tammy, as, vice presidents, as executives, and have that executive presence that isn't necessarily emulating anybody but yourself. They're creating new pictures of leadership that include very feminine, wonderful attributes, including collaboration, inclusiveness, all the wonderful skill sets that women bring into the leadership role.
And Tammy, I think that gets to your comment about you didn't understand how much more there was to tech, right? For me in security and in compliance, I have played a role that's different from many of my male peers, and I refuse to be pigeonholed. I tend to work much more broadly than they do. And a lot of what I do is about building consensus and building that buy-in to get us to the next level within the organization. And those are skills that we tend to have and own in greater proportion, I think, than many of our male peers.
Yes, absolutely. I will admit, I spent a lot of years in my career not realizing that I was the only woman in the room, and not even realizing I was the woman, because I did show up, to your point, Lori, knowing I belonged there. I'd earned my way there. Now, looking back on it, there were moments where it felt like I did 10x my male counterpart to get there, but I was in the room, and I had no doubt in my mind that my voice mattered, and I knew my superpowers. But in the last number of years, I've really transitioned from that to literally making space at the table, creating as much space for more women, and trying to find ways to inspire and excite women. When I spoke at the Girls in Tech Catalyst conference a few years ago, my keynote was girl in tech, no code required. And I loved being able to stand up and say, yes, like I am full on cyber tech, since 93 and proud of it. And, but you don't have to be a coder. There's lots of things that you can do, and it provides such an amazing career. And I also stood up and said, I'm also a mom. I'm a wife, about to have my 25th anniversary, and that, I did it my way, and that you can have it all, or maybe almost. But you definitely belong here. And so I feel like this phase of my career is all about trying to make space for as many women as possible, and to make sure that women are seen not only when they do 10x, but when they do 1x, as that is a big part of the inequality that I think we have a responsibility as the women in the boardroom, as the women, professors, and, to show it's not that you have to work 20 hours a day and be, 10x. That's the next frontier I'm looking forward to.
One of the things that I think has changed with cybersecurity, let's face it, it's gone from a focus on technology to, in the last 5+ years, more supporting the business. And some of the skills, Phyllis, that you talk about that women can bring to bear, and Tammy, you're saying, that some of the ability to communicate, that lends itself also to this change, right? The fact that, you are no longer dealing just with ensuring that your firewall rules are the right ones, right? You're now trying to say, how can I actually enable the business to migrate to the cloud and do it in a secure way? Do you see that is also helping potentially open doors for women? The fact that they have perhaps a perceived value beyond just the geek techie guy?
The geek techie guy isn't really good in front of the board.
Exactly.
You ever watch one of them?
Yes.
In any higher level position within any organization, communication skills are paramount. And that's something that women are very good at. We're also really, really good at building teams. And a strong team requires diversity. And those 500,000 positions, Lori, I think that you mentioned that aren't yet filled. There are some very capable women coming up through the ranks with the skills to fill those positions. And we need their minds, we need their hearts, and we need their passion, right? And again, women, maybe because we're juggling more things, because we're still in many instances primary in the home as well, we need to have passion in our job. That gets us out of bed every morning. Lori, what are your thoughts on that?
Phyllis, I think you make a tremendous point. I would say that it's really important to nurture very technical women as well as non-technical women. I think it's, don't discount women who code or want to code. One of the things that I think is really fantastic about IT in general and cyber specifically is, even if you have not been in the field forever, you can jump in the field because it's running so fast that learning Python now is just fine. You don't have to go through all the iterations of knowing interlist D like I did when I did programming for the Hubble Space Telescope, because nobody uses that anymore. Now we're using Python. And so you can jump in now, you can learn Python, you can be a contributor in the field. And what I love about at USM, we have a lot of non-traditional students. We have some of the highest veteran populations of any of the universities in Maine. And they're coming to reskill. And I think one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking to women about is they want to be 100% ready. They want to know the, 63 different electives they should take so they can get into cyber, where guys are like, oh, well, I'll just jump in and I'll figure it out. So that goes, Tammy, to your thoughts about 10X. We somehow have to get women to understand that they don't have to do 10X, that they can jump in and fearlessly get involved in cyber in a variety of roles and be very successful.
Phyllis, I wanted to ask you a question about, and kind of go around with each of you, influences that took you to cyber, right? So kind of, was there that certain someone that kind of just tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, really think you'd come enjoy working doing this type of stuff? Just kind of what took you in that direction initially?
Absolutely. My entry was a very dear woman who is still a good friend of mine. She's now retired. And the financial services organization I was working for was just starting with PCI. Unfortunately, the card brands had actually tapped the financial services company that I was working for on the shoulder and said, you must do this. And that's not a good position to be in. We were a bit under the gun. And she had seen me, at that point, I was operating as a high-level program manager working with some of our key clients. And so she knew me to be reliable. She knew me to be thorough and so on. And she tapped me on the shoulder and said, would you come do this for the company? And that was my entry into compliance, and from there into security. And at the time, I don't, sure, I could spell PCI, but only because it's an acronym. I couldn't have told you what it meant. But that recognition from another woman made all of the difference.
Tammy, how about in your situation? Was there some kind of key influence that took you in that direction?
There were two. First was, there was this amazing human that was so determined to have me in this space because he believed that the world needed more cybersecurity solutions. And he believed that I could help break through and taking really what was a very technical message. I mean, we were in encryption, and bring it to the world in a way that it could be understood. It would be oriented towards value. And the fact that he didn't just believe in me, it was as if he didn't believe anybody else could do it. It felt amazing because it wasn't a very well-known space. And like I said, I didn't really believe in it at first, that it was critical path. And the second was one of the VCs for the original funders of this startup is a woman who I was fascinated by because she is one of the few women at the time at the table as a VC. She had started a software company at the same time that Bill Gates started Microsoft. And so I was in awe of her, and knowing that I would have the opportunity to work with a board that had a primary member of the board was a woman with this immense background and experience. It did just feel like the door was open. It felt like the red carpet was lined up, and it was like I said, it was like literally impossible to say no to it.
That's very interesting. And then Lori, what about yourself? I know you had, again, that background kind of with the challenge, the way I look at it as, what are you doing at West Point, right? So like cracking down the barriers right then and there very early on in your career.
Yeah, and we were lucky to have a couple of great role models there, because I thought that I wanted to go into field artillery, and because everybody wanted to go into combat arms. And I had a great mentor, Carla Fisher, who is a tactical officer there. She was a captain. She was like, okay, cadet, let's talk about opportunities to command and opportunities to make a difference. And she talked about the Signal Corps and going into technology. And that really put me in a trajectory that led me to where I am today. I would also offer that at USM here, University of Southern Maine, we have really, really amazing folks in our leadership positions, President Cummings and our provost, and the dean, because when they were hiring me, they wanted a face of their cybersecurity program to be someone of diversity. They wanted a woman to lead the effort, and they went all in and funded not only me as a tenure track professor, but a master's program that we kicked off. And so even today, having people who believe in you and believing that there should be a different face as a leader in cyber it makes the difference.
That's great. I mean, we've talked about the challenges of filling positions in cybersecurity, right? We've mentioned a figure of 500,000. It may be more than that. But I have found that whether you're male or female, young people have a hard time getting that first job unless they have experience. And so Lori, I'll start with you. Do you have any recommendations as far as how to, get some of that initial experience? Because even with a degree, let's face it, in cybersecurity, sometimes that job offers is not forthcoming because they want people that have proven that they can actually do the work.
Yeah, and that's why most programs like mine, we have intern requirements so that students have to have some experiential learning as part of that. And it's really interesting, Stan, because my passion area, my research area is in cybersecurity, education, training, and awareness. I took time this summer and interviewed 50 practitioners who were hiring managers and asked them about non-technical skills, because technical skills are table stakes. That's how you get the interview. But the research shows that it's the non-technical skills that get you the job. And so what are we doing to integrate those non-technical skills? And the emphasis was on communication skills, presentation skills, as well as collaboration skills. And so how do we put that into experiential learning so that the student shines when they get the interview?
I love that, Lori. And I'm over here thinking out in California right now, I wish I could come to your school and take a part in this because it's such an important point. And, they call these soft skills often, not so soft. And, in my side, in terms of, being on the go-to-market and the sales side of cyber, there's all these preconceived notions around what sales are. You say that word and people start to go, oh, slimy, slick, fast talking, only cares about money, and that's not at all what this role is. And as there is some studies done around what do the most successful salespeople do, and even though there's this massive industry around sales methodology that's made so much money, I would look at these books and trainings that I had over the years, and I would be so disdainful about you think you're supposed to teach me to memorize and regurgitate things, to selectively listen only for the things that are going to move my agenda forward. I'm like, I was a top rep, and I'm like, that's not what I do at all. And I would never do that. Yet, as new research started to finally come out, probably about a decade ago, showing the true qualitative research around what the most successful people, at least in this particular profession, do, it was none of these things. It was that they show up authentic, no mask, they're real, they recognize that vulnerability is the source of all connection, and that when we show up our real selves with no mask, that's the only way we build connection. We need connection for trust. They realized these people were very engaged, active listeners. Talk about vulnerability, listening, so vulnerable. And that they talk about what they do through story. And so these quote unquote soft skills that I did determine how to hire for them, but I also got very excited about 6, 7 years ago. I found some training where we could actually help bring that transformation, no matter where people were on these things, we could help them get stronger in these core communication and connection areas. And I am just a junkie of all that stuff. So if you're teaching that at your university, I may need a sabbatical, Stan. I may need to go check that out.
How about you, Phyllis?
In terms of hiring, a CISO that I've got a great deal of respect for, once shared, we're in fact doing a speaking engagement together. And she very eloquently said, you look for the raw skills and you look for passion and you look for interest, and you can do it. In a lot of the data we are seeing at this point, and I had a discussion with some friends about this the other night, because I was raised as the Renaissance man type, where I wanted to know as much about everything as possible. But now many are able to enter the marketplace with some basic certifications, right? And particularly as we get into cloud. And the engineer that I was having this discussion with, had been in the industry for many years. And he shared that it was a handful of cloud certifications that he got for himself that made all of the difference in his last 10 years of employment. And that's all real. And that allows a broader swath to enter cyber, right? It can be, it's a very valuable resource pool.
That's a good point. I think taking advantage of those resources that are out there to enable yourself, right, to go out there is a good way to leverage that. Laura, you talked about this a little earlier as well, kind of connecting the dots here. So there's the, as you said, you see the student population, and you have, here's the males that think like, oh, I've got this thing, I'm at 75%, I'm good to go. And then there's the female side of it, not quite yet. Let me get to like 90, 95, and then I'm confident to go. Keyword being confident, right? How do you kind of drive more of that? It's okay. We can step it back. We can go for it. Let's try it, right? And to your point, Phyllis, it also helps kind of round it out and saying, how do we all come together and just go after something as the ambition that we have in front of us?
Yeah, I think that it's important to build non-technical kinds of activities into very technical courses. So that's where you have those classes where you have group projects, where you have scenarios where they're solving problems together, and you force people out of their comfort level. The other thing that I've done, I've created kind of a two-prong approach to extracurricular activities for cyber students. One prong is for the very technical minded. We have our Husky Hackers, that's our cyber defense club, and they're doing all sorts of different capture the flag competitions and really working on their skill sets. Many of those same students are also in a program I've started with a small amount of funding. I'm trying to get more funding, always trying to get more funding as an academic, where it's called the Cybersecurity Ambassador Program. And it's to have the students do outreach to vulnerable populations. So there's two education pieces going on. There's the education piece to vulnerable populations, veterans, children in the system, K through 12, students in higher ed, older adults especially. So we actually do workshops in things like identity theft, social media safety, everyday cyber safety, data security, and privacy. And then I'm doing my research on the efficacy for those students getting jobs in the workforce, because we've now enhanced their non-technical skills, because they've had to do much more kind of work doing outreach to non-technical populations. So those kinds of activities, and then trying to bring in women to build their confidence in their education, their experience, their exposures, that really does a lot for getting them ready for that first interview.
I think it's interesting. I kind of personalize this a little bit. So my daughter, for example, she's a junior in college right now, and she's in finance with a double major into data analytics. And so a lot of classes are collaborative, but the majority, it's her as the single female with 4, maybe 5 other males, right? And it's that conversation I keep on having, her like, go, you got this, lead the way, take control, don't scribe, right? Point out these are the things that we should do, collaborate, communicate, and get them there. So I think that really is a great way to start kind of pushing people in different directions, really no matter what industry you're trying to get into, right?
Rob, you're so right. But I also think that we as women shy away from networking, and we have to do a better job, not mentoring other women, sponsoring other women, saying, I know this great person. She's got all the right credentials, and I think she'd be perfect for your job. We need to do a better job as women, advocating for women. And there seems to be this hesitancy because we were always the only women, but we need to somehow break through and provide those opportunities for other women.
Absolutely. Well, Lori, Tammy, Phyllis, great conversation. Hopefully recruiting more women into cyber. Lori, thank you for your time today.
Oh, it was so much fun. Thank you, Rob.
Phyllis, we really appreciate having you today.
Always a pleasure.
And Tammy, thanks for joining as well.
Oh, it was awesome. And I can't wait to join the Lori and Phyllis fans clubs. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Reimagining Cyber podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to have us cover a specific topic of interest, feel free to reach out to us, and you can find out how in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe. This podcast was brought to you by CyberRes, a micro-focused line of business, where our mission is to deliver cyber resilience by engaging people, process, and technology to protect, detect, and evolve.